you're probably getting screwed over and taken advantage of, but it's not your fault. Society is set up to cater to the lowest common denominator, people that either can't or won't take responsibility and initiative and so need others to do it for them. But the problem is that then society propagates this idea that that is what everyone is supposed to do. And so many people are doing what they think is the right thing and are winding up getting screwed out of a whole lot of money, time, and happiness. My name is Sean. I'm a mental health coach. I see 40 plus clients a week. I have a 98% satisfaction rating from over 1,600 ratings. And today we're going to talk about some myths that are propagated as things that you should do that are not always actually in your best interest. So the first thing I want to talk about is insurance. Everyone and their mom says that you have to have insurance. And so what ends up happening is that a lot of people pay hundreds of dollars a month for something that fights you every step of the way to provide you some sort of service. Think about that for a second. Imagine if you went to any other kind of business and their customer service, let's say you go to a restaurant and you try to order food and they say, well, in order to order that food, you're going to have to provide us some paperwork first. And then it'll take about 4 to 6 months before we can actually bring you any food. You would never go to that restaurant again, and you would leave a horrible Yelp review too. But for whatever reason, we tolerate it with insurance, probably because most people don't feel like they have any other choice. So let's look at some different examples of where insurance may or may not be worth it for you. So the first example is if you are chronically ill and have to go to the doctor, hospital, etc. all the time, then insurance can absolutely be worth it. Now, that being said, it may be harder to get insurance because you are chronically ill, which is just awful, but it may be worth it if you can get it. The other example is, let's say that you don't make a lot of money and you can get your insurance subsidized by whatever state you live in so that you can essentially get free insurance. And I've talked to people who, get free teletherapy visits every week and don't have to pay anything for the telehealth visit and also don't have to pay anything for insurance. In that case, the insurance is absolutely worth it. Even if you had to pay, a couple $100s a month, that's absolutely worth it because you're saving so much on therapy. But there are a lot of people that make just enough money that they make too much to qualify for any sort of subsidized insurance. And so they wind up, like I said, paying hundreds of dollars a month for service that fights them every step of the way. And oftentimes what ends up actually happening is that the insurance is not very good that they get, and so they have to pay lots of money out of pocket and are still paying hundreds of dollars a month. And they might actually just be better off putting all of that money into a savings account, especially if they're healthy, they don't go to the doctor that often, just putting all that money into a savings account that they would pay for insurance, and then using that money when emergencies come up. Not to mention that for a lot of people, when they go to the doctor, the advice that they get is less helpful than, writing your symptoms into ChatGPT and getting feedback that way. And I'm not saying that that's what you should do. I'm not saying you should self-diagnose or anything like that. But what I am saying is that, unfortunately, a lot of doctors are overworked, incredibly burned out, and rush through their visits. And so someone will come in talking about something and they will just quickly prescribe something and then rush them out of the office. I hear about this all the time from my clients. And so you're paying this, hundreds of dollars a month, plus whatever you have to pay for the copay, and then getting horrible service in addition to that. And dentists are the worst offenders of this, because for dentists, a lot of times the insurance will only cover up to a certain amount. It'll be like $2,000 worth of dental work over the course of a year. And so if you run out, they just don't cover anything. And then there are still huge amounts that you have to pay on the back end. Not to mention the treatment is horribly inconsistent. You go to one dentist and they say, oh, you need filling, but then you go to another dentist and they say, no, you definitely need a crown. You go to a third dentist and they say, no, you absolutely need to have your tooth pulled out. And so it's hard to tell what kind of treatment you should actually be getting, what is right. But Sean, what about emergencies, they say? What about if I have to be rushed to the hospital, they say? The funny thing about the American healthcare system is that we may not have nationalized healthcare directly, but we do in a weird, roundabout, indirect kind of way. So let me explain what happens. So if you go to the hospital and you get some astronomical bill that you will never be able to afford to pay. What happens is that the hospital writes that off on their taxes as a loss. And so then the government ends up paying them for your medical treatment. And that's how hospitals, make it through when customers don't pay. And then people get worried because they're like, well, but if I just don't pay my medical bill, won't that affect my credit? The truth is that medical debt works very differently from something like credit card debt. And so obviously, your mileage may vary. This is not medical or financial advice, but in my experience personally and working with people, the answer is no, it won't affect your credit. So like I said, if you are one of these people where you are, chronically ill and therefore have to go to the doctor all the time, or you don't make a lot of money and therefore can get your insurance subsidized, by all means, go for it. But for a lot of people, insurance is at best a gamble and at worst a scam. Both insurance and doctors rely on the assumption that people are not going to take care of themselves. Insurance assumes that you won't save money for medical costs, and doctors, especially dentists, assume that you won't take care of your health. And so they charge money for regular checkups, cleanings, etc. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge proponent of taking care of your body, but oftentimes a, quarterly $60 blood test can give you way more information than going to a doctor visit where they, give you a prescription and send you on your way. But it's not just insurance. There's another myth that is thrown around as this one-size-fits-all solution, and that is investing. The path that is presented is that you're supposed to get a job and work your way up the ladder, and while you're doing that, you're supposed to put your hard-earned dollars into some sort of investment vehicle, like a 401k or the S&P 500, and then you keep doing that your entire life, and by the time that you're 65, you'll be able to retire off of, a modest pension or, from your investments, whatever the case. But what that means is that for the worst years of your life, because let's be honest, your body has probably suffered from all of those years of forcing yourself to work when you didn't want to, didn't enjoy your job. So for the worst years of your life, you get to have freedom, and the rest of the time you had to work really hard at a job that wasn't fun for you and sacrifice the hard-earned money to put away into savings, etc., etc. Because if you invest in something like the S&P 500, you will make an average of about a 10% return year over year. So let's say you put in $1,000. At the end of the year, you would have $1,100, which is cool. You made $100 over the course of a year. But if you instead invest in yourself, now, that doesn't necessarily, the path that I went down was building a business, but it doesn't have to be building a business. You can invest in skills. And by doing that, by investing in yourself, you can get 200% returns, 300% returns. So let me lay out a realistic example of this. Let's say that you run a crochet business, okay? And instead of taking that $1,000 and investing it in the S&P 500, you decide to take that $1,000 and invest it into advertising for your business, advertising on like Etsy or something. And let's be modest. Let's say that on that advertising, you get a 3-to-1 return, which, by the way, a lot of companies get, 10-to-1 returns, 14-to-1 returns, 20-to-1 returns. And what that means is that for every dollar that you put in, you get that much out. So for every dollar that you put in, you get $3 out, $10 out, whatever the case. So if it was a 3-to-1 return, you would put $1,000 in and you would get $3,000 out. Whereas if you had put that $1,000 into the S&P 500, you would have gotten $1,100 out. And by the way, that $1,000 to $3,000 could be over the course of a month. If you invest that $1,000 over the course of a month, then you make that in a month instead of making that over the course of a year. So you're making way more, way faster. You always hear people talk about how you should start investing early because then by the time that you're 65, you'll be rich. But the problem with that is that when you're young, usually you have so little to invest that it's inconsequential. And so that investment is actually much better spent on investing in yourself, on building skills for yourself, so that you then have significant money to invest later. Because once you have significant amounts of money, then you can put them into investment accounts and they will grow much quicker. And your money can start making money and all that good stuff. Now, I am not suggesting that everyone should start their own business. I don't think that it's for everyone. Some people are actually very happy working a 9 to 5 until they're 65 and then retiring. And to those people, that's great. Like, more power to you. I am a huge proponent of no shoulds. I don't think that you should do anything that you don't want to do. If something makes you happy, then by all means, go for it. But for many people, working a 9 to 5 job feels like rubbing their forehead against a cheese grater. And for those people, there has never been a better time with more opportunity, and it has never been easier to start your own business, especially, with the internet and all that good stuff. And let me be clear, starting a business is hard, especially when you are already mired by all of the stuff that you have to deal with in life. But that's actually exactly my point, is that a lot of the things that we are mired with, we are only mired with them because we believe them to be necessary. And when you really start to evaluate these things critically, you start to find, a lot of this shit doesn't matter. When I work with clients, we ruthlessly prioritize what is important to them and mercilessly cut everything else, because life is way too short to be toiling away on things that you don't care about. If you would like to ruthlessly cut out the things that you don't care about and instead build a life that is fulfilling for you, I'll leave a link down in the description where you can have a free 50-minute coaching session with me. So many people know that the world isn't a good fit for them, but the tragedy is that then the conclusion that they come to is, then I must just have to bend myself to the way that the world is. And in my experience, both personally and working with people, that is simply not the case. That you can build something for yourself. You can build your own little terrarium, your own little ecosystem where you can have a life that is fulfilling for you. People feel so powerless, but the truth is that you have so much more power and influence than you think you do. It is just about learning how to take the first steps in capitalizing on that power that you have. When you see ways in which the world works that don't align with you, slough them off and find the ways that fit for you. I am a staunch believer that there's always an alternative. You can always find a different way to go about things. And that has served me very well in my own life. And here's the thing, it may actually be harder. It may actually be a harder route to go down. But what's cool is that it doesn't feel that way because it is something that is aligned with you. It is something that is important to you. And so even though it may objectively be harder, it feels so much easier because you actually want to do it. There's a great quote that is the idea that if you work hard, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life is a load of crock. You will work harder than you ever have in your entire life. It is just that the tools will feel light in your hands. And again, this isn't just some aspirational, naive crap. This is how I have found contentment in my own life and how I help my clients find contentment in theirs. So don't settle for the way that the world works, because not only are those train tracks not meant for everyone, but they are horribly outdated. If you want to know more details about how I got to where I am using this sort of, prioritizing what is important to you process, this video goes through my sort of story of how Hearthstone ended up leading to a coaching career that I'm super happy with. So if you're interested, check that out. It'll either be here or down in the description, and I'll see you next time. Bye.